Judged for his appearance, this farmer's next move silenced the doubters for good. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon as Samuel Carter stepped out of his dusty truck in the airport's private hangar lot. His boots crunched against the gravel, the scent of fuel and fresh morning dew mingling in the air. The hum of nearby aircraft engines set a backdrop for what Samuel hoped would be one of the most important days of his life. He adjusted his wide-brimmed hat, the same one he'd worn for decades working the fields. His denim shirt and weathered overalls hinted at long days of labor, the kind of work that left hands calloused and shoulders strong. Samuel was no stranger to skepticism or sideways glances, but today was different. He was here to fulfill a vision, one born from years of hard work, determination, and a dream to revolutionize his business. Walking into the hangar, Samuel was greeted by gleaming jets lined up like trophies, their polished surfaces reflecting the golden morning light. Inside, a few suited men milled about, deep in conversation. As Samuel approached the reception desk, a tall man in a crisp grey suit caught sight of him. His eyes darted to Samuel's boots, then back up, taking in the faded clothes and straw hat. The man's polite smile wavered for a fraction of a second before he approached. "Good morning," Samuel said, extending a hand. "I'm here to see about buying a jet." The man's brow lifted, his smile tightening. "You're here to buy a jet?" His tone was carefully neutral, but the pause said more than words ever could. But Samuel had faced doubters before, and he knew exactly how to handle what was coming next. Samuel wasn't always the man walking into an airport hangar to buy a jet. He'd built his life from the ground up, literally. Born and raised in a small farming town in rural Mississippi, he grew up watching his parents struggle to keep their farm afloat. They'd taught him two things that stuck. Never let your circumstances define you, and always find a way to adapt. By his early 20s, Samuel had inherited the family farm. The fields stretched wide, but the profits were razor thin. For years he poured every ounce of energy into finding ways to survive. He tried it all, selling at local markets, taking on seasonal labor, and even working odd jobs during tough winters. Nothing seemed to be enough. That all changed the day Samuel decided to stop following tradition and start innovating. While other farmers stuck to selling their produce at nearby towns, Samuel thought bigger. He realized that if he could ship his crops to cities across the country, he could cut out the middleman and reach more customers directly. It wasn't easy, banks didn't trust him, neighbors called him foolish, but Samuel pushed forward. His first big break came when he secured a contract with a grocery chain in Dallas. Samuel invested in refrigerated trucks, hired workers, and built a small empire. Over the next decade, he expanded beyond crops, adding dairy and meat to his operation. By the time he turned 50, his farm was supplying food to over 10 states, with customers relying on him for fresh, quality products. Now, at 57, Samuel had another bold idea: direct delivery by air. The jet would make it possible to transport his produce faster than any competitor, giving him an edge and ensuring freshness like never before. To Samuel, the jet wasn't just a luxury, it was a tool that could elevate his business to a new level. But stepping into a space dominated by corporate executives and millionaires, Samuel knew he wouldn't look the part. That didn't matter to him. His success wasn't measured by his clothes or how he looked. It was measured by the lives he'd touched, from his workers to the families eating the food his farm produced. Back in the hangar, the salesman's eyes darted to Samuel's boots again, this time lingering on the mud caked around the edges. "And what kind of jet are you interested in?" he asked, his tone polite but edged with skepticism. Samuel smiled, the kind of smile that carried the weight of 1,000 sunrises over the fields. "Something reliable," he said, "that can carry fresh produce across the country without a hitch." But the salesman's reaction was far from encouraging, and Samuel could sense the storm brewing just beneath the surface. The salesman cleared his throat, adjusting the cuff of his perfectly tailored sleeve. His name tag read Elliot Blake, and everything about him, from the shine on his shoes to the precision of his haircut, screamed sophistication. Elliot gestured toward the showroom area, where sleek jets rested like museum pieces on polished floors. "Well, Mr. Carter," he began, emphasizing the name as if he wasn't sure it belonged to Samuel. "These aircraft are designed for a particular clientele. Are you certain this is what you're looking for?" Samuel didn't miss the hesitation. He'd heard it too many times before, sometimes subtle, sometimes loud and clear. But he wasn't here to argue. "I know what I need," Samuel replied evenly. "I've done my research." Elliot's smile faltered. "Of course," he said, leading Samuel to a jet parked under bright overhead lights. "This is the Maverick 300. It's ideal for business use, seats 8 comfortably, with excellent cargo capacity. Starting price is $3.5 million. The way Elliot said the number, it was as though he was daring Samuel to flinch. Instead, Samuel nodded thoughtfully, stepping closer to the jet. He ran his hand along the smooth exterior, his fingers tracing the craftsmanship. "How much weight can it handle?" Samuel asked, his voice steady. Elliot hesitated. "It depends," he said, carefully choosing his words. "Most of our clients use it for executives and their luggage. Are you sure it's suitable for your needs?" Samuel turned to face him, his expression calm but unyielding. "I'm transporting produce, not passengers. The weight specs are critical." Elliot blinked, clearly thrown off. "Produce?" he repeated, the word hanging in the air as if it didn't belong in the conversation. He glanced at Samuel's boots again, the faintest trace of disdain flickering across his face. "Mr. Carter, this is a luxury jet. It's not exactly a delivery truck." The words stung, but Samuel refused to let it show. He knew Elliot's type, men who measured worth by the cut of a suit, the gleam of a watch, men who couldn't imagine a farmer walking into their world with more than just dirt on his hands. But Samuel also knew something else. Men like Elliot rarely saw the full picture. "I'm aware of what it is," Samuel said firmly. "That's why I'm here." Elliot raised an eyebrow, but before he could respond, another man approached. Dressed in a similar suit, but with a friendlier demeanor, he greeted Elliot with a quick nod before turning to Samuel. "Good morning," the newcomer said. "I'm Tom. Can I answer any questions for you?" Samuel shook his hand. "Samuel Carter. I'm interested in purchasing a jet for business transport. I'd like to know more about this one." Tom glanced at Elliot, sensing the tension but choosing to ignore it. "Of course, Mr. Carter. The Maverick 300 is an excellent choice. It's versatile and has a maximum cargo capacity of 2,500 pounds. Would you like to step inside?" For the first time, Elliot looked genuinely uncomfortable. Samuel could feel the shift in energy but decided to stay focused. "Yes," he said, gesturing toward the jet. "Let's take a look." But as they climbed the steps into the sleek cabin, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from the end of Elliot's doubts, and he was prepared to face them head-on. The cabin was pristine, with leather seats that gleamed under soft interior lighting. The layout spoke of wealth and convenience, seating for a handful of people, polished tables for in-flight work, and enough space to stretch out and enjoy the ride. Tom guided Samuel through the features, explaining everything from the onboard navigation system to the fuel efficiency. "Impressive," Samuel said, his tone thoughtful. He ran his hand over the armrest of one of the chairs, imagining the crates of fresh produce he could load and the cities he could reach. Elliot lingered near the door, his arms crossed. He wasn't bothering to mask his skepticism anymore. "You'd need to make some modifications," he said sharply. "Jets like this aren't typically used for hauling produce." Samuel turned to face him, his expression calm but piercing. "And yet, they can be," he replied. "Efficiency is efficiency, no matter what you're transporting." Tom cleared his throat, sensing the tension. "It's true," he said, stepping in. "We've had clients customize jets for various business purposes. It's all about meeting your needs, Mr. Carter." Samuel smiled slightly, appreciating Tom's professionalism, but he knew Elliot wasn't done. "And what kind of operation are you running, Mr. Carter?" Elliot asked, the words laced with thinly veiled condescension. "If you don't mind my asking." Samuel paused, considering his response. He could have easily dismissed the question, but he decided to let his story speak for itself. "I own and manage Carter Farms," he said, his voice steady. "We supply fresh produce, dairy and meat to grocery chains across 10 states. My team has over 50 employees, and last year we generated $12.8 million in revenue." For a moment, silence filled the cabin. Elliot's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of disbelief. "12 million?" he repeated, as if the number itself was foreign to him. "That's right," Samuel said, "and we're growing. Demand keeps increasing, and I'm here because this jet will help us meet it. My customers count on quality and speed, and that's exactly what I intend to deliver." Tom looked genuinely impressed, while Elliot seemed to be struggling to process what he had just heard. That's quite the operation," Elliot stammered, attempting to recover. "I didn't realize—" "You didn't ask," Samuel said plainly. His voice wasn't angry, just matter of fact. "You looked at me and assumed." The words hung in the air, undeniable and heavy. Elliot opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Tom, sensing the moment, broke the silence. "Mr. Carter, I believe this jet could be an excellent fit for your needs," he said, his tone genuine. "If you'd like, I can connect you with our customization team to discuss the modifications." "I'd appreciate that," Samuel replied. "Let's make it happen." Elliot shifted uncomfortably, his confidence visibly shaken. Samuel caught the look, but didn't dwell on it. He'd encountered countless people like Elliot over the years, people who underestimated him, dismissed him, or outright ignored him. But Samuel had learned long ago that the best way to deal with doubt wasn't anger. It was results. As they exited the jet, Tom excused himself to grab some paperwork, leaving Samuel and Elliot standing by the stairs. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then, Elliot cleared his throat. I owe you an apology," he said, his voice quieter now. "I misjudged you." Samuel turned to him, his expression unreadable. "You're not the first," he said simply, "and you won't be the last." Elliot nodded, his gaze dropping to the floor. "Still, it was wrong. I'll make sure everything moves smoothly from here." Samuel studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Fair enough." But even as the tension eased, Samuel couldn't help but wonder how many others faced the same judgment and never got the chance to prove themselves. That thought stayed with him as the day unfolded. As the day progressed, Elliot's demeanor started to change. Whether it was guilt gnawing at him or the realization that Samuel was serious business, his once dismissive attitude gave way to something resembling respect, or at least an attempt at it. When Tom returned with the paperwork, Elliot stayed close, chiming in with details about the jet's specifications. His tone was smoother now, more professional, but Samuel could still sense the undercurrent of discomfort. Elliot wasn't used to being wrong, and it showed. "So, Mr. Carter," Elliot began cautiously, "if we proceed with the purchase, I'd recommend adding reinforced cargo flooring. It would help with the weight distribution of your, produce crates." Samuel glanced at him, noting the effort. He decided to meet it halfway. "That's a good suggestion," he said. "I'll need to speak with your customization team to ensure it fits the business model." Elliot nodded quickly, almost too eagerly. "Of course. We can set up a meeting as soon as you're ready." The shift in Elliot's tone didn't escape Tom, who shot Samuel a knowing glance. It was subtle, but it was there. a shared understanding between two men who had seen this kind of behavior before. Samuel appreciated Tom's quiet support, but he wasn't here for validation. He was here to get the job done. As the conversation moved to pricing and logistics, Samuel stayed sharp. He knew his numbers, and he wasn't about to let anyone upsell him on unnecessary features. Elliot tried once or twice, suggesting add-ons that Samuel quickly declined. By the third attempt, Elliot stopped, realizing Samuel was no easy mark. By the time they finished, Elliot seemed genuinely invested in making the sale work. He even offered to personally oversee the customization process, a gesture Samuel couldn't decide was born from sincerity or damage control. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," Elliot said as they wrapped up the discussion. "We'll make sure everything is handled with care." Samuel simply nodded, his expression steady. "I'll hold you to that." As they walked back toward the hangar's entrance, a small group of people gathered near the front desk caught Samuel's attention. One of them, a young black man in his early 20s, dressed in a crisp maintenance uniform, was speaking animatedly with an older gentleman who looked like a manager. From their body language, it was clear the younger man was pleading his case about something, but the manager seemed unimpressed. Samuel slowed his pace, watching the interaction unfold. The younger man glanced up and caught Samuel's eye, his expression shifting to something like recognition. Samuel wasn't sure why, but something about the scene struck a chord. He turned to Tom and Elliot. "Give me a moment," he said, his voice firm but calm. He walked over to the group, his boots thudding against the polished floor. As he approached, the manager turned toward him, his expression polite but guarded. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked. Samuel looked at the younger man, who straightened his posture under Samuel's gaze. "What's going on here?" Samuel asked, his voice steady but commanding. The younger man hesitated, glancing at the manager before speaking. "I was asking about an opening for an apprentice in the aviation maintenance program," he said. "But I don't think I'm what they're looking for." The words hit Samuel harder than he expected. He saw himself in this young man. The same quiet determination, the same fire to prove himself in a world that often judged before it understood. But Samuel wasn't about to let this moment slip by without making an impact. He had an idea, one that could change more than just the course of his own day. Samuel turned his attention to the manager, his steady gaze making the man shift uncomfortably. "And why wouldn't he be what you're looking for?" he asked, his voice calm but unmistakably firm. The manager stammered, clearly caught off guard. "Well, sir, it's not that he isn't qualified. We just have a lot of applicants, and we prioritize those with more experience." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "Experience? Or something else?" The young man's eyes widened, his lips parting as if to speak, but he quickly pressed them together. Samuel could see the conflict in his face, the urge to defend himself clashing with years of being taught not to make waves. "What's your name, son?" Samuel asked, turning to the young man. "Derek," he replied, his voice steady despite the tension. "Derek Porter." "Well, Derek," Samuel said, loud enough for everyone in the area to hear. "I don't know much about aviation maintenance, but I do know talent and determination when I see it, and you've got both." Derek looked stunned, while the manager fidgeted uncomfortably. Samuel turned back to him. "I'm purchasing a jet from this hangar, a jet that will need maintenance. Now, if I'm going to trust your team with my investment, I want to know you're giving opportunities to people who are willing to work for them." The manager's face turned red, but he quickly composed himself. "Of course, sir," he said, his voice tight. "We'd be happy to reconsider Derek's application." Samuel nodded, satisfied but not fooled. He turned back to Derek. "I've been in your shoes," he said quietly. "Don't let anyone tell you what you're worth. If they won't give you a chance, Find someone who will. Derek nodded, his expression a mixture of gratitude and determination. "Thank you, sir," he said. "I won't forget this." Samuel offered a small smile. "Neither will I." As Samuel walked back toward Tom and Elliot, he could feel their eyes on him, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. He didn't offer any explanations. He didn't need to. "Everything squared away?" Tom asked, trying to lighten the mood. Samuel nodded. "Just tying up loose ends." Elliot looked like he wanted to say something but stayed silent. For the first time all day, he seemed genuinely reflective, as if the events had shifted something deep within him. As Samuel stepped outside, the crisp air hit him, carrying the faint scent of jet fuel. He looked up at the sky, his mind racing not with doubts, but with possibilities. The jet wasn't just a tool for business, it was a statement, a symbol of what could be achieved when you refuse to let others define your limits. But for Samuel, the real victory wasn't the jet. It was knowing he'd made a difference in someone else's journey, just as others had done for him long ago. As Samuel drove away from the airport, the weight of the day began to settle over him. The deal was done. The jet was his. But that wasn't what stayed with him. It was the look on Derek's face, the flicker of hope that Samuel had recognized all too well. He knew how rare it was to have someone believe in you when the odds seemed stacked against you. He thought back to his own journey, the countless times he'd been underestimated, dismissed, or outright ignored. Yet, here he was, a farmer from Mississippi, about to use a private jet to transport fresh produce across the country. Not because he'd fit the mold of what success was supposed to look like, but because he'd refused to let others define his worth. Success wasn't just about the money or the achievements. It was about the lives you touched along the way, the people you lifted up when no one else would. And Samuel knew that his story, his presence, and his choices had the power to shift perspectives, even if just a little. That was the lesson he hoped others would take from his journey. Resilience wasn't about ignoring the doubters. It was about proving them wrong. And humility wasn't about staying silent. It was about letting your actions speak louder than their judgments. Samuel had come to the airport for a jet, but he left with something far more valuable, a reminder that every step forward could pave the way for someone else. To all those watching, remember this. You are more than what the world sees. Your dreams are valid, your work is meaningful, and your perseverance will always matter. If Samuel's story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And most importantly, never stop believing in your worth.